Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Well, today I'm in this 2021 Nissan Leaf. Now the Nissan Leaf's an all-electric car that's been around since 2011. The first generation Leaf was one of the first battery EVs to hit the market. Yes, there were several prior to that, such as the Mitsubishi i-MiEV and the G-Wiz, but the first generation Leaf was one of the first mass-market EVs where people actually considered an electric car for the first time. The trouble with that first generation is that because it was all new technology, the range wasn't great. You were talking 70 or 80 miles tops. And now as they've aged and the batteries have degraded, it isn't surprising to find a first-gen Leaf with a range of only 40 or 50 miles, which is useless. The car I'm in today is a second generation which came out in 2018, and it's much better. It's also, thankfully, much better looking. I don't know why manufacturers insist on making their EVs and hybrids look so weird. Surely more people would have adopted them sooner had they just looked like a normal straight car, rather than looking like something off the Jetsons. I know styling's a subjective matter, but in the case of the first gen Leaf, then it really isn't. It's objectively but ugly. It just looked too curvy and too weird and too futuristic. I think it genuinely put off a lot of people. But this second generation, especially in black, I think it looks alright. I don't think it's a great looking car, but it isn't ugly enough to completely rule it out either. And most importantly, this isn't some sanctimonious rolling advert for your green credentials like most EVs are. This doesn't make you look like some smug do-gooder who's trying to show off. It just looks like a car. Now there are two different models available, the cheap one and the more expensive one. The cheaper one comes with a 39 kilowatt hour battery and a 150 horsepower electric motor. That'll give you a range of, they say, 168 miles, but realistically in the real world that'll be more like 120, 130. Then you've got the more expensive Leaf known as the E+, like the one I'm in today. This has a 217 horsepower motor and a 59 kilowatt hour battery, which increases the range considerably. Nissan claim this will do 239 miles from a single charge, but that's a bit optimistic. I think in the real world that figure's more like 200, which is fine. Perfectly usable. In the early days of EVs, most had a range of less than 100 miles, which is quite hard to defend and justify, but I think a range of 200 miles is a figure that most people could live with. I think I could anyway. This would make a great city car or second car. In fact, I think you'd find yourself using it 70 or 80% of the time. Possibly more, in fact, because it's just a pleasure to drive. Everything's really easy. I'll do the old bypass test, shall we now? So, foot to the floor, and yeah, feels quite brisk. I'm already doing the, there we go, speed limit. I think if I were to drive it like that all the time though, my battery range would soon be zapped. The Nissan Leaf range consists of the base model Vizia, then you've got the slightly higher spec Centre, then you've got the end connector, or you've got the range top in Tecna. That's what I'm in today, the top spec Tecna, and it has all the luxuries you'd expect from a premium car. You don't have to compromise or forego anything. You walk up to it and it's got keyless entry and keyless start, then you get inside and you've got heated leather seats, a heated steering wheel, sat-nav, cameras everywhere. It's got it all. All you do to start it is press this button down here, you pop it into drive, and you're away. It's just so effortless, everything's so easy, but I think the thing you'll most like about it is the silence, the simplicity. There's no clunky gear changes because you've only got one. There's no hesitation. There's no engine kicking in and out every time you get to a red light. This just starts, goes and stops. Couldn't be easier. As a car to nip around in then, I think it's great. It's actually quite addictive. You almost feel as though you're in a toy car. It's actually quite entertaining. Because it's quite a large hatchback, it's a very practical car. How eerie. I'm at some red lights and you cannot hear. Well, all I can hear is the fan motor. That's it. I'll tell you what, when these lights turn to green, I'm going to sting it. You ready? That's quite quick, actually. There we go. Wow. The acceleration starts to slow down as soon as you get to about 45 miles an hour, but 0 to 35 is genuinely brisk. Anyway, back to the interior space. So up front, you've got loads of headroom because it's got quite a high roofline. There's plenty of legroom, plenty of elbow room, and it's the same story in the back. Unfortunately, there's quite a pronounced tunnel in the back, so the middle passenger won't have the most legroom. The other two will be fine though, and there's plenty of headroom back there. In addition to that, the windows are very tall, so it does feel like you're in a nice, bright, airy car, even though I've got a dark interior. Moving back to the boot, because there's no fuel tank, the boot is huge, genuinely cavernous. It offers 435 litres of space. The only downside really is the large boot lip. It just means you'll have to heave all your shopping over that to get your things in the boot, which is a bit annoying. The rear seats fold down as well, but because the batteries live under the rear seats, they don't fold completely flat, which is slightly disappointing. There are also plenty of storage compartments. I've got 2 cup holders, some storage down here for my keys or my phone or my wallet. The door bins are a good size. I've got a decent sized glove compartment, a nice leather armrest. It's all pretty good, really. There are some negatives though. For example, all the buttons and switches look and feel a bit cheap and old-fashioned. Bear in mind this E Plus Techno model was a £40,000 car when it was new, and it doesn't feel like I'm in a 40k car. Take the switches for the heated seats, for example. I think they're off a 1993 Nissan Bluebird. I just wouldn't say I was in a 2-year-old car. It feels like I'm in a 6 or 7-year-old one. The other negative is that the seats are quite firm. They're like the seats out of an M Sport BMW. They're not the most comfortable, they're just too hard. In terms of handling and performance, then I think you'll like it. You get that instant torque that EVs are famous for, which I don't think will ever cease to put a smile on your face. This will do 0 to 62 in just under 7 seconds, and it's got a top speed of 98 miles an hour, which unless you live in Germany, is perfectly acceptable. The steering's very light and vague and numb, and it isn't the most engaging car to drive, but it's still quite an enjoyable experience. I think you'll love the silence and the nippy acceleration. This second generation actually sits 5mm lower than the previous generation, so it does have quite a low centre of gravity. There's not an awful lot of body roll. Of course, if you drive this with a heavy right foot, then your range will be compromised, but the same's true of a petrol or diesel car. Bit of a stupid comment really, that, wasn't it? I found myself driving this like I drive a hybrid, very gentle with the accelerator to try and eke out maximum range. I picked this up this morning and its charge level was at around 70%, which gave me 150 miles. I'm now currently on 53% and it's still showing a range of 116 miles. So I do think for most people, unless you're up and down the motorway all day, this sort of range would be enough. This new Leaf features a system called e-pedal, which basically, well, let's try it actually. So now I've pressed that button, I basically don't need to use my brake. As soon as I take my foot off the accelerator, it starts to slow me down, quite dramatically. It's a very heavy-handed regenerative brake system. Watch this. Foot off the accelerator. Rapid retardation. I think once you've mastered the parameters of this e-pedal thing, you could genuinely drive it with one leg. No Heather Mills jokes, please. Leave the poor girl alone. What's she ever done to you? Happily though, you don't have to use it. It's not something that's on every time you get in the car. It's just off until you turn it on. It rides quite nicely though. It soaks up all the bumps, it isn't too firm. I'm not a big fan of these rock hard seats, but apart from that, it's all quite pleasant really. In terms of servicing, EVs are very cheap to run. I mean, think about it, under the bonnet, the only fluid there is my screen wash. The only things that you'll wear out are the consumables, tyres, brakes, that sort of thing. In addition to that, the battery pack and electric motor are covered for another 8 years or 100,000 miles, so there is a bit of reassurance there. In terms of running costs, even though the price of electricity has soared recently, they should still be slightly cheaper to run than the equivalent petrol or diesel car. Plus the road tax is free. Something else that's negative to mention is that although this does have the fast charge capability, it's quite old-fashioned now, so it's just nowhere near as good as its rivals. The Leaf's limited to a 50 kilowatt charge, which means this can be topped up from 20% to 80% battery in 90 minutes, which isn't all that fast, is it? I don't know about you, but I don't have 90 minutes free where I can lounge about reading the newspaper while this is getting more electricity. It just wouldn't work for me, that. I think for me, the only way I could make this work and make it fit into my lifestyle is charging it overnight on my driveway. I just wouldn't want to rely on public chargers. Something else which I should point out, and this really infuriates me, the charging lead this takes isn't the latest style, so you might find yourself arriving at a public charging point and your lead just won't fit. So really the Nissan Leaf is best used as a local runaround and then charge it on your driveway overnight. I think when used in those circumstances, then I could get along with it pretty well. You will need to invest in a home wall box though, because with one of those it'll take about 11 hours to charge from completely empty to completely full. If you don't invest in one of those and you're relying solely on a 3-pin plug, then guess how long this takes from completely empty to completely full? 32 hours. Welcome to the future, guys. So I suppose in summary, if you can afford to buy one of these as a second car or a city car and you've got somewhere to charge it overnight, then go for it. I'm not sure though I'd be happy paying £40,000 for a brand new one, when you could buy one like this that's just 2 years old with 8,000 miles on the clock for 25. It's a £15,000 saving. At £40,000 I couldn't justify it, but at 25 then it's a slightly more attractive proposition. If you look on Auto Trader, you can pick up high mileage, low spec examples with that smaller battery pack and electric motor for half that again. But I'm not sure I would. I think you need the range that this 59 kilowatt hour battery provides. A 200 mile range is really the minimum I could live with from my EV. A couple of years ago I had a Fiat 500e which had a range of about 90 miles, 100 miles depending on the conditions. And as much as I tried to justify that because it was a cool little car, the range just wasn't good enough. Well, I think that's about it. So thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. If you've had one of these or got one of these, then let me know your experiences below. So yeah, cheers guys. See you next time.